Welcome to the More to His Story podcast. I am so glad that you all have come along for this episode, which I think you're going to find helpful. And sometimes we wonder, do we need to make distinctions about our tribes theologically? And is that important? Does it matter? I think it does. And I think we're going to hear more about that today. But yet we're going to look at that in a deeper way within the broad consensual tradition of what it means to be a follower of Christ, and then what it means to be in this tribe called Methodist. So we're going to introduce my guest in just a second. But this podcast comes to you from Wesley Biblical Seminary, where we are sending out trusted leaders for faithful churches. We do that all over the world. This coming fall, we'll have 580 students. I'm still hoping it'll get higher than that. But they're serving churches all over the world, and we are thankful for the opportunity we have to be with them as they are working through this transformative process. We do that through bachelor's, master's, doctoral degrees. We have a course of study program for the Global Methodist Church and the Primitive Methodist Church, which some of you might not even know exists still, but it's one of the oldest denominations in the Methodist tradition. And then on top of that, we're thankful for the chance that we have to have a program called the Wesley Institute. It's primarily geared to lay people, and it starts in September. It's a 9-month program that walks through every book of the Bible with seminary professors teaching each week, and you can get onto that online. We'd love for you to check that out. There's also one that's a theology track that does the same thing across 9 months. So we have several things coming in the from the Wesley Institute. We'd love for you to check out at wbs.edu. Also, I'd love for folks to sign up for my email list at andymillerthird.com. That's my website, andymillerii.com. And you can find several things there. There's a new video study on heaven, hell, and everything in between. Then there's also a study on the book of Jude, a study on holiness. These are things you can use in small group settings or in Sunday school classes, and you can check that out at my website. All right, I am so glad to welcome to my podcast my friends, Ryan and Jason, or Reverend Ryan, who is the Chief Operational Officer for the Mid-Texas Conference, and he is a senior consultant and senior advisor for the Wesley House of Studies at Baylor University. Then I have Dr. Jason Vickers, who is in a role of an endowed chair of Wesleyan theology at Truett Seminary as well. He's in the Global Methodist Church, and they have a new book. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy. Great to be with you, man.
Yeah, good to see you. Now, you've both been on before in the past, but now you're on together. So we had Ryan on last year as we were approaching the convening conference of Global Methodist Church. Jason, it's been a couple of years. We were on where we were reflecting on Billy Abraham's life. And so it's good to have you guys back. So I have your book, new book by Seedbed. I'm not sure if it comes up backwards for those who are watching on YouTube, but profoundly Christian. I almost read it the wrong way. I almost said profoundly, distinctly Christian Methodist. No, profoundly Christian, distinctly Methodist.
That's it.
And I know that there's another guy named Andy Miller. He's Andy B. Miller, Andrew B. Miller at Seedbed, and he was wanting to make sure that I got, I know if he's excited about a book, it must be good. And so at our annual conference, he came up and he just wanted to make sure I knew about it. So I'm curious, what is this? What are you guys doing? This is you come together, a systematic theologian, historical theologian, and a pastor and leader in the church. What are you guys thinking? Ryan, why don't you start us off? What's the idea here?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to share about this resource with you, but really with the church more broadly, which is who it's written for and designed for, to be used by members of churches to learn more about our own doctrines, theology, who we are, how we engage the world around us in thoughtful ways. As you know, when the GMC was in its pre-formational days, one of the projects that launched was the formation of a catechism. The idea that before we launch a polity, we better really be sure we know what it is that we believe doctrinally. And so Dr. Vickers was the editor for the GMC Catechism for the task force that did that work. Once the GMC launched, and my church was an early adopter, moved right in to the GMC, I took the 77 questions of catechism and preached them in a 14-week sermon series.
Wow, 14 weeks.
So, yeah, we were really covering a lot of ground. But what I discovered was people were so excited, so hungry to know what it is that we believe. and why and what difference it makes. And so when Jason was selected for the endowed chair at Truett to be our academic head for the Wesley House of Studies there, we sat down, we got to know each other a little bit, and then I invited him to lunch, and he discovered there's no free lunches with me. And I said, hey, man, I think it would be great for us to partner up, just as you said, Andy, pastor and professor, to write a resource from using the catechism, writing a resource that local churches can use to take the whole church all the way through our doctrine and what it means to be both profoundly Christian, but also distinctly Methodist, living that out in their day-to-day life. And so that was the genesis of the project. It's pretty broad in scope. You've got the adult manual in your hand. There's a series of videos that go with that curriculum. Okay. There's a youth curriculum that is now with the publisher that will be published for youth confirmation in the GMC and catechesis. Great. A set of video teachings goes with that, and then a set of sermons and worship resources so pastors can actually preach through it. So the idea behind the resource is that from the pulpit to the classroom to the young people, everyone in the church has an opportunity to go through catechesis together and really have a lot of unity around the doctrines of our faith.
Yeah, very interesting. Jason, I'm curious, like this process of moving from writing the catechism or editing the catechism and then moving to this, is this like an expansion of that idea and how you were thinking through that? Like it's the catechism is pretty short that we had put together, which is intentional, right? So tell us about that catechesis process, writing that document and then moving to this.
Yeah, so the catechism is kind of falls in, and this mirrors the structure of the catechism, which falls into two big parts. Kind of one part that is really what we share in common with the ecumenical church, which is really based on the Nicene Creed as the chief resource. And then sort of the second half of it is more informed by what we used to call the Confession of Faith, the EUB Confession of Faith, as that was one of two doctrinal standards in the Methodist Church, which has come over into the GMC. And that captures a lot of our Wesleyan distinctives. And those were the two main, Nicene Creed, the Confession of Faith, were kind of the two chief sources, along, of course, with Scripture, for the catechism. As you said, the catechism is, a series of questions that range from the doctrine of God through creation, human nature, sin, salvation, Christ, the Spirit, the church, right, and so forth. This resource mirrors that and expands on it. So every week, it has near the beginning of each day the questions directly from the catechism for that subject matter. But then there's material that's written to help people to think about those questions. And then at the end of each day, questions for them to ponder, prayers, things that help them come together and discuss that. That's getting into a little bit of the structure of the work, but it's based on the catechism and it really expands on it.
I'm interested too with this title, Profoundly Christian, Distinctly Methodist. We talk a lot about distinctions, but let's just, what do we mean with these adjectives as we're, and maybe, what do we think, what are we trying to get at? Well, what does it mean to be profoundly Christian, Jason? What are we trying to tackle there?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it reflects that basic structure so that we share belief in the triune God with Christians around the world of other denominations. We don't worship other gods. We worship God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So profoundly Christian is sort of our way of signaling that we don't think that we're the only Christians on planet Earth. We don't think that the Methodists are the only Christians out there. There are other Christian believers in and among the people of God, and so we think we have a lot in common with them. Then there are things that, of course, the distinctly Methodist part. There are things that are distinctive of our teachings as Methodists. I always like to pause here, and we highlight this in the book too at the beginning. There that distinctive or distinctly is not the same thing as uniquely. So
Mm-hmm.
that saying that say sanctification is a distinctly Methodist teaching. It is distinctive of Methodism, but that distinctive doesn't mean we're the only Christians who believe in sanctification. There are
Right, right.
so in that sense, the distinctly part, we're just trying to say here are the doctrines that we tend to emphasize as Methodists, that we tend to amplify in our teaching overall.
Beautiful. Yeah. I'm interested with the term Methodist, what we mean when we say Methodist and who is a Methodist and what does it take to be Methodist. I'd love for you both to take a stab at that. So we have distinctly Methodist, and I love that distinction about the word distinctly. So Ryan, what in your view, like what is it? What does it mean to be Methodist? And I'm not my goal here, maybe the part is not to say what does it mean to be global Methodist, which I know you can speak to. Both we all three are in the Global Methodist Church, but what does it mean to be Methodist in its broad sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold, right? I mean, it's somehow we handle the things of God, the mysteries of God, and understand what those things together speak about His nature and character, His being. And then the second is just in practice. How do we live those things out? How do we live those beliefs out, and in ways that are obviously methodical, the exercise of the means of grace? Again, as Jason said, it doesn't. These things don't make us unique, but taken together as a whole, they do make us distinct as a people that have been come to be known as Methodist.
Right.
Like my best analogy is like I have freckles on my body. I'm not the only person with freckles on my body,
Right.
but the pattern, the number, their location, all taken together does distinguish me, makes me distinguishable and distinct from other people with freckles. And so in the same way, it's not like there's one thing as you're going through the book, like, oh, this is the one thing that makes me Methodist. It is the collection of the whole, both of our understanding into the insights of who God is, and how we, practice that, live that faith out in the course of our life, and exercise that faith. Put together, it begins to give some definition of what a Methodist really is.
Yeah, I think you could answer the question, historically, you could answer it theologically, you could answer it liturgically. There are all sorts of ways to get at it. I mean, historically, the term, of course, goes back to Wesley and the renewal movement that he led inside the Church of England. It's a term of derision back in that day. People making fun, so to
Still
speak.
for some today, I mean,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
let's be fair,
True.
still some today.
As people making fun of them for their methodical practices, and for being very rigorous in how they went about the Christian life. That's a historical way to think about the term. The term, though, is used by various groups, starting with the Oxford Methodists in
Yeah.
Wesley's day, but all through history, the 19th, 20th century, 21st century. The Global Methodists are not the only ones that use it. Free Methodists use the word. There's a World Methodist Council. So lots of people, lots of denominations use the term. I think there are Methodist established doctrines. There's, the Articles of Religion, which Wesley cut down from the 39 articles, sent over to the people called Methodist in America as they were getting ready to form their own church. Partly because of the American Revolutionary War. All this is historical
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, important.
There's a
It's very
lot
important.
of the kind of historical, ways to think about that word and what it means to be Methodist. I do think that Methodism, it's not just so in those articles of religion, there are a set of doctrines that we inherit essentially from Wesley, and that at least in America, the Methodist Church is going to adhere to and is going to regard as a standard of doctrine. So there's doctrinal content that's constitutive of Methodism. But it's not just that. You could look at polity, structure, sort of how we practice administration, polity, governance. There are different words you could use here. And here we'll get into things like episcopacy and superintendency. So, Methodists are typically Christians who agree to some kind of oversight, whether we call that superintendency or episcopacy, bishops, they're different Methodist groups use different words for that, but it means there's some kind of you might say centralized and somewhat top-down system of governance. That doesn't mean that it's kind of strictly top-down, but there is a centralized kind of top-down governance that's embodied by bishops historically. But again, that's just a different kind of thing than doctrines. And I think that's all part of, then we could get at liturgy, Sunday service, hymnody. I think I could make an argument that hymnody is as constitutive of Methodism as anything. There's a hymn book for the people called Methodist, that the Wesleys, publish and that inherited. And I think so. Our music and our hymnody is constitutive of our identity. So I think
you can't be Methodist if you never sing in Can It Be?
There you go.
So this is really interesting, Jason, because I agree that with the idea that polity in an Episcopal system probably is most Methodists affirm that. But one of the surprises to me when coming to Wesley Biblical Seminary was I would have been able to tell you all of the traditional holiness movement denominations like Nazarene, Free Methodist, Wesleyan, and the like. And I know you've spent time in various bodies too, and particularly in a Nazarene church. But I've been surprised to learn of some of these traditions. Like I mentioned at the front of the podcast, primitive Methodists still exist, and they have a congregational system of polity. Congregational Methodists, evangelical Methodists, independent Methodists, all these groups. So it's caused me, particularly, I think part of it is just working with students and realizing, oh, well, we're all claiming this legacy, but you have a different take on polity. So I'm interested in what is it that it can unite these bodies. I do think there's a historical and theological side. And I wonder too, if it's something like Phil Meadows talks about there being almost being like a energizing renewal group, whatever. And that Methodist in his mind how existed before John Wesley. Anytime where there was this renewal back to the primitive church that was trying to emphasize a renewal, a heart-warmed experience. That's also a kind of a part of the Methodist tradition. But I know where you're going. I said a lot there, Jason. I'd be curious to have you respond.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that the Episcopal thing is exclusive, that no one who doesn't practice episcopacy can rightly think of themselves as a Methodist. I mean, that's ridiculous. Historically, that's just demonstrably false. But I think that probably I would guess maybe a bit of a majority of the overall tradition has had some form. So even when you talk about Free Methodist, Wesleyans, Nazarenes, the holiness bodies, they may not call them bishops, but they have boards of superintendents, that are centralized and that exercise authority, and to whom lower, if you will, next tier down superintendents, in a sense, represent an answer to them in some ways. And then from there, clergy, are responsible to those, in various ways, very complicated, right? But there's a bit of a hierarchy, right? From general superintendents to district superintendents,
the
rank and file clergy and to laity and so forth. I don't want to put that in too simplistic a way, but I mean, I do think that's fairly considered. Now, the congregationalist side of it, I mean, it's there. And if anything, the dissolution of the UMC into not just, everybody likes to think it just split into two denominations. But truth is, there's arguably a third, which is all of the congregations that disaffiliated and did not become part of any other existing or new denomination. So now there's a big network, and they're really not networked. There's a whole bunch of what amounts to Methodist congregations out there that are not
Yes.
in a denominational structure.
Right.
And so
Right.
then by definition, they're not Episcopal. So
Right.
that's a recent development that we've seen. So then you would say that method clearly polity is something that there are different expressions of Methodist polity. I do think that some kind of accountability,
Yes.
even
Yes.
if it's within a congregation, you can't be Methodist and be a radical libertarian in spirit, in matter spiritual, and in terms of personal discipline as a Christian, where you just say, I don't care what any other Christian thinks. I'm just going to live the way I want to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but it's not a Methodist sentiment. So bans and things like that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we've always put an emphasis on mutual accountability.
Right.
So
Right.
sometimes that gets expressed in terms of the relationship between laity and clergy, between clergy and those tasked with oversight, denominational structures. Other times it's more expressed in just within a congregational body.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we do answer to one another in various ways, and so that's how I would maybe try to
That's good.
resolve that, is to think of it in terms of accountability.
Yeah, and I think even the systems that have are a smaller system that's completely voluntary and you can go and come, like Association of Independent Methodists. They don't want to be called a denomination; they're an association. But if you start to say we're a Calvinist Association of Independent Methodists, well, then you're no longer a part of that group. And so there is something that unites them. And I think that's what the point is. Like, there's accountability to what this means. And Ryan, you've probably had to deal with this too, because as you're working with churches, you probably have several right now in your inbox who are wanting to come in or trying to think of what does it mean to be a part of the Global Methodist Church. I'm curious what you think of this phenomenon of there being Methodist groups that are not connected.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I know it works for some. It probably wouldn't work for me. I've always been nervous about what would happen if I didn't have accountability. Even from my earliest days, I can remember my first appointment. I was serving a large church. I was the kind of like the young associate, and the service I was leading was growing pretty quickly. And there were people there that were like, "Hey, we should go on our own and just take this, and then but you can be in charge." And even then, I was like, "I don't think that's a good idea for me or my soul, and therefore for yours."
Yeah.
So at least for me, it really works to be connected, to be accountable. And, I'm certain that those who are, living kind of an independent Methodist life right now, post disaffiliation, are smarter and more self-disciplined than me and are putting those systems in around themselves. But for me, I like having a spiritual authority and leader who holds me accountable, who, if there's even a question about my conduct as a pastor or leader, can also vet through that. I mean, there's that as well. It's not just to hold me accountable, but it's also to assess anything that could be said about me and say, no, I've looked at this and there's nothing, like, no, none of that's right. So I think that's, and in the GMC, we're learning how to do that at every level.
Yeah, sure.
Not just having bishops be a final authority unto themselves, elected forever, and living in an echo chamber, but we've put even accountability over our highest officers and leaders, so that even their judgments and assessments are judged and assessed. So for me, no system is perfect, at least not on this side of heaven. But I obviously appreciate the Methodist way of things, or I wouldn't be a part of it, and certainly wouldn't want to be a leader in it if I didn't think that we offer a good deal of stability and safety and security to the people who fill our pews. And that's really where I think it's important, is we all know how destructive it can be in the spiritual life of individual believers when you don't have accountability, and things go sideways. It's great when it's all working, but when it goes sideways, that can really be disillusioning. And so I think Methodism, in this iteration, offers help and stability, and continuity. I'll tell you, I mean, some of those emails you mentioned in my inbox right now are from churches whose pastors they disaffiliated but did not want to join anything else, and they have now come to retirement, and the churches have tried to put out their help wanted sign in the newspaper, I guess, but realize finding a well-trained, vetted person who's had their backgrounds checked and credits checked, and has had somebody sign off and say, boy, this person has the gifts, the graces, the fruitfulness to serve a community. They're finding that hard to do on their own, hard to find, especially medium and smaller size churches. And so we do get calls from them, and we help, whether they're trying to join the GMC or not.
Wow. Yeah.
We send interims and try to help their local people. Some have decided to join the GMC on the other side of experiencing who we are, and some, are still in the interim phase.
Yeah, sure.
We'll see what happens.
This tension is something that's been around almost since the beginning, and I say the beginning after John Wesley dies. So 1791, John Wesley dies. By 1797, you have Alexander Killam, a man who's got, and what he starts to see is that he thinks that Methodism had become too authoritarian and wanted to have more the lay people have a voice. So he was called the Robespierre of Methodism, and is interesting character who comes on the scene. And then there's this back and forth. I think that this balancing act has happened time and time again in this tradition. And I'm a little biased, but I think we're getting there in the Global Methodist Church. Like, I think that it's swinging various ways, and we see abuses in the United Methodist Church, but I think it's coming to a healthy place. Now, it doesn't mean there's not disagreements or hard things. And I love, Ryan, that generous spirit that you all have towards serving these churches that, have been through, difficult times.
Yeah.
Okay, let me move. I'm sorry, I didn't get to the book but I want to move on. I have a little bit more time than I had planned, so I was able to push some things back so we can talk a little longer. I like the format of this. This isn't just a book that says, okay, here's a sermon series, here's 6 weeks, here's some discussion questions, go. Instead, this is a real formative experience that moves through an entire week, culminating each week in this gathering. So I really am interested in this structure. I haven't seen it before. So I'm curious, either of you, Jason, maybe Brian talked last, so maybe you could talk about that structure, since it might seem like, oh, I'm sure the pastor added that, but you guys agreed on this.
Yeah, we really did. And I mean, the idea is that the book guides people through, multiple days of reading, reflection, and ultimately with a view toward coming together on the last day to have discussion as a group, having everyone's now been through the same material.
Yeah.
And of course, there are videos to help with that. Those could be shown during the discussion day, is kind of, I think, what we were envisioning. But yes, it's designed to be used both personally or individually during the week, so to speak, but ultimately to bring people together as a group. So I think it will work best if it's utilized that way in a group fashion. Ryan, you want to jump in and add to that, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Jason and I both feel strongly that you can learn in isolation, but that there's something that's missing if you're not learning in community as well. And so, the daily reading and the weekly gathering for synthesizing what it is you're learning and how it is that you're putting it into practice is super important. And we did. I mean, we didn't want to just write a novel, that you sit down and read on your own, but we also wanted to do something that people could do. I mean, I know how busy my life is and my wife's life, and so you can sit down and read for 15 or 20 minutes each day, follow through on reading of the scriptures that are listed out, and over the course of the week, you really are getting a deep dive into some pretty robust theology and doctrine. And then again, getting a chance to process it together as a community is super helpful.
Yeah. I love the approach, and there's, space for people to write. Like, it's truly like an experience that people walk through. We have a church here locally, and people will know I'm I'll try not to say the name, but it's a large church that is disaffiliated and is independent, and they're still figuring out what they're going to do, but they've hired a pastor who comes from outside of the Methodist tradition. And so a lot of people were wondering, well, is this going to fit? And you both work at a Baptist school, but it can work. And so he came from a Baptist tradition, but he had a wonderful perspective in coming in saying, like, I'm coming to you, you have this history, and I want to learn about it. But I think, and I've heard this multiple times, so it's not just in this case, as he's trying to learn about it from the people who are there in that congregation, they don't know much except for a cultural understanding of Methodism. So, Jason, we were talking at the very beginning about what is this historical, theological, liturgical, and another side could be social. Now, I don't like the fact that it's the same thing about the word evangelical. It's like, well, depends on when you ask or who's asking. Sometimes that sounds like it's a voting block, and I'm thinking of it in a historical, theological way. But that was what they realized, is they didn't have an understanding of what it meant. So I think this is the type of book that could help them to really get that, form that foundation of, like, and this is the opportunity that people in the church have. Ryan, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I do, because this was part of the sense of why I think it was so important that the GMC came out with the catechism in the first place initially, and why, as a pastor, I felt burdened to immediately sow that into my own congregation. It's this, the GMC was obviously born out of primarily out of disaffiliation and hard decisions that people had to make. And their hard decision was represented in walking away from buildings. And even if they didn't walk away from buildings, they walked away from friendships, sometimes lifelong, close ties, clergy from those clergy ties from sometimes decades and decades of serving side by side. So it was a rending kind of thing. And this is what I realized, is that when we went to our people and said, we need you to make this really hard decision based on what we believe. And they said, okay, I'll make it. And then they came back and they were like, so what we believe really, really matters. Like, we have to know, because weighty, important, eternal, decisions have to be made based on what we actually believe to be true about God, about the Word, about salvation, about human identity and our created nature. And so that's the hunger that I saw in my local church. And as we started working on this project, one of the things Jason and I did was we actually taught the material we were going to put in the book over a couple of months in my church to our people, but also several hundred people online that joined us from across the country.
Wow.
Listen to their feedback and questions. And I mean, it's true. People were in the GMC were like, okay, so what we believe is really important. It may cost us. I want to know what it is, so I really can build on that firm foundation. And so that was really, our pastor's heart, our love for the church and people that kind of comes out in this product and putting it into churches. Is I think it will do that for churches. And that's why we did it, so that it could be done from the pulpit in the Sunday school classes and with the kids, is so that everyone can get on the same page with what do we believe and why does it matter? If you notice, I mean, that's each week ends with, why does it matter?
Yes, amen.
It's not just, this is what we believe, but it makes a difference in your daily life and the decisions you make.
Mm-hmm.
And while it's a GMC, I mean, we wrote this with GMC churches in mind, and it's sourced with what amounts to GMC, um, material in terms of the confession of, insofar as the confession of faith via the catechism is informed
Right.
it. The fact of the matter is, the first half of it, which is
Yeah.
informed by Scripture and the Creed, belongs to the ecumenical church.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, an independent Methodist congregation, a holiness congregation, you don't have to be GMC to use the resource and to benefit from it, at least in our judgment. I think it could easily be used in non-GMC churches, and especially churches that think of themselves as Wesleyans or Methodists, or even if they're not GMC. Because again, the even the Confession of Faith, I mean, was written in 1946, by the EUB Church,
Yeah, sure.
when two other denominations, predecessor bodies, came together to form the
Yeah.
EUB Church. So, if anything, even the second half of this curriculum of of this particular text, informed by the EUB Confession of Faith as it is really not if you're not GMC, it doesn't mean you couldn't benefit from it. The fact is, I think anybody that is Christian, and especially Wesleyan of any stripe, could use the curriculum.
Yeah, this is exciting. I think it's a great resource. I love the way you've all taken time to lay it out and to have this really deliberative structure at the beginning of it. I'm interested, Jason, you're working at, well, you've probably done now, but you're working at Tom McCall on a systematic theology, and you cover all these same subjects in a different way, right? It's like you hit all this. So tell me, contrast these two documents.
Yeah, well, this one is the one you've got there, profoundly Christian, distinctly Methodist, is well, how about what is it, about 100 pages or
Yeah,
so?
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
I don't have it in my head.
109, 203, 203.
That that
Well, the
no,
text itself,
yeah,
197. Let's say I'm
okay.
just looking at the.
Yeah, and the systematics is probably 700. So, and it's finished. It'll be out next year. It's already at the publisher at Erdman's. And so it's just the same topics, the same subject matter essentially, but treated at much greater depth and brought into conversation with the the Christian theological tradition across the ages, and also we tend to address very specific, pressing, contemporary issues and developments.
Gotcha.
So, we take up, all kinds of issues in there that Ryan and I don't take up in this volume. So, for example, um, if we discovered that there was extraterrestrial life, uh,
Yeah.
how, if at all, would that affect the way we think about God, creation?
Yeah.
Would it matter? Would we apply the same theological categories to the aliens? Right?
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
As bizarre as that sounds, the concept that there might be other
Yeah. Yeah.
intelligent life out there somewhere is a contemporary thing. It's something that, I mean, we make movies about it. I mean, all
Yeah.
kinds
Sure.
of
Sure.
movies. The Jodie Foster movie and Matthew McConaughey movie Contact is all about, this kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
question. And believe it or not, Wesley actually explored that issue at one point, right? So it's not without precedent in the tradition. So that would be the other difference, is the systematics just deals with a lot of contemporary questions and issues. We take up all sorts of things, gender and sexuality and other kinds of contemporary issues. Um, and then we deal with things like open theism, process theology. It's we engage those kinds of things, which are more programs or projects in contemporary theology that we wanted to speak to. And of course, none of that is in this
Yeah.
text.
Sure. I'm
Yeah.
interested though, like if this might be one of these kind of Thomas Oden sorts of moments where you have nothing new to say. But is there anything you feel like with the particularly first section I think you know what I'm saying when I'm talking. There's nothing new to say. Like you're just trying to articulate the faith once for all delivered right here in a Methodist way. But what do y'all? Is there like a particular chapter that you're proud of that you think, yeah, this is kind of a new way of saying this, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah, Ryan, you go.
Well, okay, so Andy, being a part of a project like this was like a lifetime bucket list. So I'm proud of 10 chapters.
All
like
right, okay,
10 of
amen.
10. And so grateful to Jason Vickers for teaching me how this process works. I mean, the guy's so prolific. This was one of 4 or 5 books he wrote last year.
Okay.
And several in multi-project partnerships, you know. So no, but I think yeah, I mean, I think for me, I particularly like where we landed on the word. I felt like that opened up for people a deeper understanding. I hope that you have the living word, you have the written word, you have the proclaimed word, and here you really do begin to get into some of the distinctly Methodist part in that, you know, the centrality of the proclamation of the word and speaking Christ into the space and the holiness of that moment. You know, Fred Craddock used to talk about breaking the silence that, you know, when the earth was formless and void, God broke the silence of eternity and he spoke and called things into being. And, you know, the preacher himself stands in the silence in the moments before he opens his mouth to begin the proclamation. And, you know, he dares to break the silence. And so what he says, you know, better matter. It better be true to the text. And so I liked where we landed on that. But I like where we landed on, I mean, obviously I like where we landed on everything because it has my name on it.
Amen. That's good.
And I really do. You know, the other thing I really liked from the product itself was the videos, which are now out and people can get to use them. We did not want to rehash the book. We didn't want it to be like, you go and you watch the video and you're like, I know I already read that.
Yeah.
And so what we tried to do was explore and expand the topics, you know, so like if we cover, you know, our eternal hope, for instance, we talk about the reality of heaven and hell and who goes where and how that's determined. But then in the video, we're able to dance into some of the questions that when we taught this, people had after class.
Yeah,
you know, they're like,
great.
So a little more peripheral, but also, you know, the things that people want to know about when they get going in a conversation about these topics. So for me, Jason, I don't know if there were other places than those, but those were some things that I was really excited about.
I think early on, and this would be something that this book has in common with the systematic theology that I did with Tom, and that's early on, we really do press on the notions of divine goodness and love, the steadfast nature of God's character, that God is unchanging in terms of who God is. That you know, God doesn't just have attributes, God is God's attributes. God is love, God is goodness, God
Yeah.
these kinds of things. And so we press on that in this book a bit, especially given that it's intended for a lay audience. But I think we do it in a way that it has an eye on assurance, meaning that the, you know, God's steadfast nature is the deep ground of assurance. That God's not going to be, you know, loving on Tuesday and hateful on Thursday, or good on Wednesday and evil on Friday, right?
Yeah.
That's not the God that we believe in. That's not who God is. And so there's a sort of reliability, a dependability in terms of God's nature and character that ultimately is the ground of all assurance. You know, that's
Wonderful.
so that's something we really kind of press on in a way that might be a bit different.
Yeah.
You know, that's not, those aren't always notes that get sounded in a lot of Wesleyan conversations.
Yeah, and I think that sets you up for sanctification chapters sections really well too. So that's great. I love hearing those emphases. I knew this could be a long conversation. We don't have too long on this, but do you all cover women in ministry in this book? And I imagine you do it, Tom, but maybe
we do.
Yeah.
We do in the systematics. I'm pretty sure if it's there, it's not. If it's in this book, and you have to forgive me, Ryan's right. I mean, I've been had too many projects going at one time. It would be there just in a simple, direct affirmation, but not
Yeah.
some kind of elaborate defense of it. But rather, it would be part of just our discussion of the fact that in the church there are offices of ministry.
Right.
We believe in ordination. We believe in that. I mean, we hit on some of those things, but I think in this book, partly because it's based on the catechism,
Yeah.
there's not a real elaborate treatment of that topic.
Right. Right. Just curious. This is one of the questions practically is making its way to the church now.
Yeah.
So as I think you all have, it is, I'm not revealing any secrets, that as churches become independent and have a role in choosing their own pastor,
Mhm.
can they say, we think we want a male pastor this time? And what does it mean to affirm women in ministry? So I know this is like one of those areas that needs work. And so that's why, and I'm not blaming you. Please don't feel badly for me. Just because if it's not there, I was just curious. It was just a question.
No. And I think I would say this, like, I actually had an interesting conversation with Sandy Richter not long ago on this topic, or I mean, it was a few years ago when we were starting the GMC. And, one of the things that she said that was convicting to me was, our predecessor denomination incorporated women into ministry for cultural reasons, not for biblical reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that was they could have done the biblical work and gotten to the same place, but they didn't. They failed to do the biblical work. And so you had a generation, of people who thought, well, we can just do whatever we want because the culture says so. And it led us into some real problems. And so we have to go back and redo the labor, redo the work. But when we do, it's all right there. And so I think from my point of view, what you will discover in there is a kind of a return to the foundational doctrines and lacing that in from pew to pew to pew to pew. That this is who we are, this is who God is, and this is what we believe. And from there, you can do some of the higher level thinking and work. But if you don't know the foundation, you can't do. I mean, you won't treat it. You won't treat those kind of like second tier questions well if you don't have a good foundation. Good. And if you haven't seen it, actually, I will say Seedbed just released an hour and 20-minute video from Sandy Richter on this topic. And I mean, it is a tour de force of the biblical text. Her treatment of it is stunning. It's every GMC person needs to watch it. It's so good.
Beautiful. Great. Well, thank you guys for your time. I normally ask a question. I'll try and get it in quick here. There's more to this story. So you guys have done a lot publicly. Is there something that, like a hobby you have or something people don't know about you that might be unique you might want to share here? Jason, what about you? What's more of the story of Jason Vickers?
Let me think. So hobby-wise, just outside theology, I love all things outdoors. I ride motorcycles.
Okay.
I like to hunt and fish. Grew up in Georgia doing that, and still do that pretty actively. In fact, McCall and I will be. We've got a big hunting trip to Montana planned in the near.
Oh, there you go. Big game hunting probably up there. We'll see.
We're kind of that'd be something for me.
Yeah, it's fun. Ryan, how about you?
Well, I'll tell you one that's fun that relates to Jason. In the course of doing all this, we've become friends. In fact, he taught my son how to shoot a shotgun, and he's got a thing that shoots the skeet up into the air. And he taught my son how to shoot skeet. So,
and you're the Texan. You're the Texan on the call here. But the Georgian
true.
had to do this for you.
It's true. But I grew up in Houston.
Okay.
Which, if you don't know, it's a bit of a big town. But anyway, he's
fun.
Yeah.
Well,
we had fun doing this for sure.
I'm so glad you guys did that. And Ryan told me about you guys took some time together to make this happen, and trusting God's going to use this resource for His purposes, and thankful for the way you gave both of your skill and time to do this for the church. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Andy.